Good evening, universe, and welcome to my fourth attempt to film this video. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in February. It was a really good month for me, both in terms of the quality of the stuff that I was reading, plus the amount of stuff that I read. So let's dive right in. The first two things that I read in February were Witch Hat Atelier, volumes 2 and 3. This continues with the amazing Studio Ghibli vibes. We dive into some of the characters a little bit more. We get some more background, well, not really background, but we get more depth of Coco, the lead character. She definitely gives me Toru from Fruits Basket vibes. She has that kind of irresistible goodness that helps people around her really connect with her in a sincere way. But she's also very clever, so she's really good at using her surroundings to figure out solutions to problems. Even though she gets like emotional and stuff like that, she tends to be really good of a little problem solver, and she's so determined to help people. I absolutely love her. I love a lot of the other characters as well, such as Agate here, or Agat, I'm not sure. I absolutely love her. She's stubborn and prideful and clever and talented. Then we have Kifri. He's the teacher type figure. He has his own secrets going on, and we get a little bit into that. Although there are tons of characters that I love, probably my favorite character is Brush Buddy, just because he is so cute and cuddly and amazing. I'm gonna see if I can find a little picture of him. Look at this precious boy enjoying a snack with Coco. Oh, he's so cute. I love him so much. So if you have no other reason to read Witch Hat Atelier, do it for Brush Buddy. For a completely different vibe, the next two things that I read were The Speaker and the Storyteller by Traci Chee. These are the second and third books in the Sea of Ink and Gold trilogy, also known as the Reader trilogy, and I loved them. These are great young adult fantasy novels. I think they also work really well as a crossover to adult fantasy, kind of like a Mistborn type series. And these follow Sephia as she tries to find out why her parents were killed, what's going on with her past, and ultimately the things that she finds, change the fate of the world, as often happens in a young adult fantasy novel. Even though the structure felt really similar in a lot of ways, it felt very fresh. The characters had a lot of depth to them. I really like Sephia because she feels very human, and a lot of her struggles were extremely relatable to me. Her desire to save certain people and how that kind of selfishness shapes her decision making throughout the series. I loved it. Let me break down these a little bit book by book real quick. No spoilers or anything, just kind of a general sense. The Speaker is book 2. It's a little bit faster paced than The Reader. So if you read The Reader and you felt like it was a little bit slow, I would recommend picking up The Speaker because it does definitely pick that up. It still has that sort of sense of really pulling you deeply into the world. So that isn't lost with the faster paced, but this definitely feels like there are more plot points, more things that we're learning, because the first book is a lot of like setup, developing the world, explaining what's going on. This is more like consequences and actions that come from that knowledge. There's also a lot of themes of friendship, of the ability to love somebody after they've done something atrocious, destiny, and fighting back against it, and determining where your loyalties lie. The only thing that I didn't like about the second book was that there was less of Captain Reed, who is probably my favorite character in the series, and I wanted a little bit more of his adventures. It really felt like he was mostly there to remind us that he was a character and set him up for what happens in book 3. Book 3, also fantastic. Obviously the fast pace keeps up because a lot of this is finally getting to the actions that have been promised since book 1. We get the final piece of world building, understanding exactly what's going on, including in some really awesome and unexpected ways, we'll say. There was a point where we hit some world building that really surprised and delighted me. I loved it. I rarely see books do this, and usually not in such a good way. I really loved the plot overall, the way that things occur. I'm really glad that the author went the way that she did, because there were definitely some other opportunities to make it a little bit more similar to other stories, and this author didn't do that, and I really appreciate that. The only thing that I didn't like about it was the ending. I didn't have a problem with the way that it ended. I just didn't like how we didn't get more of the falling action. So the last kinds of things, events occur, and we don't really get to sit in too much with our characters following those things. We don't get to really live in those consequences. And I understand that in some ways, but I do wish we had had a little bit more time with the falling action. That was pretty much my only complaint. Otherwise, this series is absolutely fantastic. The magic system, it's called Illumination, and it is so cool. And you can change the world around you and have knowledge of the world by like focusing in on people. And it's just so cool. Fantastic book series. I actually read The Reader more than once, and about half of The Speaker I read twice. And I definitely felt that I got a ton of more stuff out of it reading it again. This is definitely one of those series that feels very lush. You can enjoy it the whole time you're like sitting in this world. It feels very like it's wrapping around you, really holding you. I was kind of going through a rough time when I was reading this too, in some ways that were very relatable to Sephia. So I really appreciated it. I just can't recommend this series enough. If you haven't read it, definitely give it a try. Since that book series is a little on the heavy and long side, I wanted to read something a little bit light and quick and refreshing. So I picked up another Wayward Children book by Seanan, or possibly Shannon McGuire. So I read In an Absent Dream, which I think is number 6. No, that's super wrong. It's like number 4. Anyway, In an Absent Dream, this one follows Lundy, who we meet in Every Heart a Doorway, and she goes on a trip to Goblin Market. I loved the world. I loved Lundy. I related so hard to her so quickly. She's like this rule-following nerd, and I lived that experience a lot as a kid. And Goblin Market was great, as usual, an excellent novella. Next, I read Ash by Malinda Lo, which is a sapphic retelling of Cinderella. I picked this up a long time ago, like 5 years or something like that. I picked it up during Pride Month, and I wanted to have a couple more like queer reads, especially young adult fantasy queer reads, because that's what I like the best. So at the time that I picked it up, the pickings were a little bit more slim for that particular thing, and I was excited to read a sapphic retelling of Cinderella. And then I set it down on my shelf, and for whatever reason, I didn't pick it up for a long length of time. However, I finally got to it, and honestly, I thought it was one of those ones that I was going to start reading and then DNF and either donate or sell back. And that didn't happen at all. I actually really loved the voice. Well, okay. At first I thought I was going to DNF it until I got about 60 pages in. So I wanted to give it its fair shake. And by then it had really hooked me. The voice was incredible. I liked the main characters. It definitely has that fairy tale, magical, drifty kind of feeling, but it also makes the characters feel really real. One of the things that I loved most about it was the step family, like the stepsisters and the stepmom. I think it's really easy to make those characters these impossible villains, because that's what they are in the original fairy tale. They're just cruel for no reason. And while I know some people are like that, it is kind of hard to see them as real people when they're in books. But this book didn't do that. It really made their casual cruelty and the way that they treat Ash feel really not understandable, because there's no reason to treat somebody that way, but it made sense. Like, you understood what internal logic was allowing them to do the things that they did or have the viewpoint that they did. And I really loved that. I also loved the romantic interest when we got to meet her. The fairies are kind of like the cruel prince type fairies, where they're a little bit harsh. It's that kind of fae, the like tricky fae that you have to be careful with dealing with. And I always love those kinds of fairies. I adored the fairy godmother in this. I thought that was great. And yeah, overall, really good read. Oh, real quick, two other things that I really liked about it were, one, the theme of self-discovery in the face of other people trying to define you and unlearning that and then relearning who you actually are. I loved those themes. That's always gonna hit a chord with me. And also I really liked the way the main character's attraction to another girl was portrayed. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times there will be like a coming out scene or like a dramatic like you're gay type situation. And that wasn't in this book. But what was in this book was this like pervasive assumption that everybody is straight. So nobody was like shocked and horrified or anything like that when it turned out that she was, you know, interested in another woman. But there was just this kind of underlying assumption of you're a girl, you're attracted to men. I thought that was really relatable because I feel like in a lot of circumstances, especially now, at least where I have been, people like know that gay people exist and stuff like that. But there's this underlying belief like, oh, you're a person, you will be attracted to a person of the opposite sex. And the way that the main character felt vaguely uncomfortable and couldn't understand why when somebody was like, oh, you are into this guy, I really thought that made a lot of sense for me. And I absolutely loved that portrayal. And that was Ash by Malinda Lo. Next up, I wanted more retellings, always retellings. So I picked up Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, probably, even though I want to say Smythe. So this started out as a webtoon. It was a comic published on the web, if you don't know what a webtoon is. And my wife has actually been reading this for a long time, and it always looked really beautiful. Look at how beautiful it is. So like striking and different, but I'm not really good at reading things on screens, so I never picked it up. And then I saw this in the bookstore and I was so excited. So I grabbed it and I was not disappointed at all. It was fantastic. This is a retelling, re-exploration of the Hades Persephone story. So it follows mostly around Persephone. Look at her on her little horse. Persephone is one of my favorite Greek figures, so I am always down for another version of this that delves into her character. It was fantastic. I love this version of Persephone so far. I love Hades. Don't know why he's upside down here, but I'm into it. I love his upside down city. The art is so cool. I can't express enough how cool. If you hear a slapping noise, it's just me riffling through the book. But look at how striking and unique this art style is. It's so beautiful. My only sadness about this is that I have to wait for the other volumes to come out. Fortunately, we will be getting 2 new volumes at least this year. I think the next one comes out in June. I'm going to say July so that I don't get my hopes up. So it comes out sometime this summer. I'll be picking it up instantaneously because I absolutely loved this. The writing is great. The characters feel so human. It's also an interesting idea because it's in like a modern world type setting. So they have like cars and cell phones and they go to clubs and stuff like that. And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition of their magical powers. Just realized I've been out of focus for a while, so I apologize for that. Am I going to refocus? Hold, please. So yeah, Lore Olympus, so fantastic. If you love Greek figures, Hades and Persephone, or just want to see some really just like gorgeous art, highly recommend that. It's also really cool to see a more indie author move into a more traditional sphere. I know that's not for everybody, but I think it's cool that some people are able to do that and have that option. I think that's really encouraging and awesome. Next, I read Stepsister by this author, whose name that I don't remember offhand, but will be on the screen. Well, I didn't actually read it. I DNF'd it, which is one of the reasons why I don't remember the author's name. I didn't dislike this book, but when I started reading it, it just wasn't hooking me in. This is another retelling of Cinderella, but it follows the stepsisters, specifically one of the stepsisters, and it opens up with the 2 stepsisters chopping off parts of their feet in order to fit those feet into the glass slipper that the prince has come around with to try and find the princess. So the first sister slices off a part of her heel and is discovered, and then the second sister chops off all of her toes in a really just grisly opening scene. That was one of the things that drew me to this book. Unfortunately, it didn't really work for me because there are the personifications of fate, which I wasn't really into, as well as the personification of chance. And then those two forces are like working together to change the fate of the titular stepsister, whose name I also cannot remember currently. I didn't really like that aspect. I also didn't really feel super drawn into the world. It felt kind of small. The pacing was also a little bit strange for me. Instead of chapters, it's like a chunk and then it'll be like broken up by like one of those little like swirly boys. Do you know what I'm talking about? So I wasn't really into that. I like a little bit more of a traditional chapter breakdown situation. And the other thing that didn't work for me was that the characters their traits are blatantly described in a way that didn't really draw me in. Usually I like it a little bit more when you understand a character's traits from the actions that they take, maybe bolstered by adjectives every now and again. But this one felt very in your face, like she's tough and will buck the rules and stuff like that. It just felt a little bit too straightforward for my tastes. I think that this would work really well for a slightly younger audience, maybe 12 to 14. I think would suit this book really well, as long as they are okay with the, kind of bloody nature of it. There is blood on the cover, so it's not really a surprise. To me, from what I read, it felt a lot like a juvenile aimed Gregory McGuire type book. So it does have that darkness, but also the telling felt a little bit more like it was aimed for somebody who's a little bit younger. And since it started to feel a little bit like homework to get through it, I went ahead and DNF'd it. The next book I read was In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. This is my first ever thriller, so that was definitely an interesting experience. I liked it enough that I'm going to continue trying the genre, but not enough that I'm going to try other books by this author. The premise is basically this woman gets invited to a bachelorette party weekend situation, but the person who's getting married, the bachelorette in question, they haven't spoken for like over 10 years. And so she's a little bit confused, a little bit unsure. She's kind of a shut-in, but she and her friend decide they're both gonna go and give it a try. The book basically follows two dual timelines. One is in the hospital where our main character has woken up and is trying to figure out what happened over the course of this weekend, and the other is the weekend as she remembers it. Overall, I thought it was fun. It was somewhat thrilling. There were a couple points where my interest waned, but overall, I thought it was a fine read. If you're interested in hearing more about this, I do have a reading vlog about it. Next, I read The Camelot Betrayal by Kiersten White. If you have been following my videos for any length of time, then you have probably heard me rave about the Guinevere Deception. I absolutely love this series so far. Book 2 was equally fabulous. I might have even liked it more than book 1, but I might just be biased because I read it more recently. This continues to follow Guinevere. This book has a little bit more of a focus of her trying to figure out where she stands in Camelot with all of the information that she got in book 1 and the consequences of the stuff that happens at the end of book 1. We get more character development, more of her unraveling the mystery surrounding herself. I liked the developing relationship between her and Arthur, like her trying to figure out where she stands in relation to Arthur, as well as her relationship with Lancelot and Brangian and all sorts of other characters. There were so many cool developments in this book. The pacing is immaculate, and I love the little italicized portions where you get a different perspective and it's mysterious and strange and you have to try and kind of piece it together. Fantastic book. Can't wait for book 3, but I have to because I don't want to buy the hardcover version of it. I want to get the paperback. Unfortunately, it's not available yet. And I tried to borrow the third book from the library, but other people were also all over that. So I am in line waiting for my hold to come through. Hopefully soon. And then the final thing that I read in February was Across the Green Grass Fields by Shannon McGuire. I'm so sorry for consistently mispronouncing your name. Someday I will remember to look it up. In the meantime, though, I really liked your book. I like this fiction that I've created where the author is watching. Across the Green Grass Fields is about Reagan, who is a young girl who is intersex. She has a problem at school and goes to the Hooflands because Reagan is a horse horse girl. So the hooflands, basically everything hooves. So like we're talking centaurs, kelpies, things that you haven't heard of, but they have hooves. Yep, they're there. Unicorns, probably Pegasuses, but I don't remember seeing any. It's very cool. I love unicorns. So I was into it. I liked the like centaur society that we see. My only complaint about this one was that I didn't really understand the logic of the ending actions that Reagan takes. But overall, as usual, another great series, another light, small read in between other chunky boys. Overall, aside from that one DNF, I think I had a fantastic reading month for February, and I appreciate you staying and listening to me ramble about those things. I hope you also had a great reading month in February, and I hope you have a beautiful night, universe.